The Duke said her love was a sin, until her tears made him question what true love means for two souls. The silence in Lawnwick Abbey's cavernous library suffocated like a shroud. Lady Mirelle Solent stood with her head bowed, the amber ribbon trembling between her fingers, as Duke of Veras regarded her from across the vast mahogany desk. His eyes, the colour of a winter sea, hardened as he placed the small gift back upon the polished surface. "This display of sentiment is most inappropriate," he pronounced, his voice cutting through the hushed sanctuary. "I had believed our arrangement was perfectly clear, Lady Mirelle." Mirelle's breath caught painfully in her chest. The ribbon, her modest offering of affection, lay between them like a confession. "I merely thought that is precisely the trouble." He rose, his imposing figure casting long shadows in the lamplight. "You have been thinking with your heart rather than your position." Outside, rain lashed against the diamond-paned windows, echoing the tempest brewing within. The Abbey's stone walls, ancient and unyielding, seemed to absorb her unspoken pleas. 3 months had passed since their arranged marriage, 3 months of politeness stretched thin over an ocean of loneliness. "Oh, Your Grace," she ventured, her voice barely audible above the storm, "might I inquire what sin I have committed by offering you a token?" The Duke's jaw tightened, a muscle flickering beneath the austere planes of his face. "You seek to tempt emotions where duty should prevail. Our marriage was arranged to salvage your father's debts and preserve your family name. It was never meant to invite attachment." His gaze fell upon her wedding band, cold, heavy platinum that mirrored the weight upon her soul. "Sentimentality is a weakness, Lady Mirelle, one I have purged from my life through considerable discipline." Mirelle's fingertips whitened around the folds of her amber gown. 21 years of life had not prepared her for such frigidity. Her father had warned her of Thalin's reputation, widowed young, hardened by loss, renowned for his moral rectitude and charitable works, but equally feared for his uncompromising nature. "Forgive me," she whispered, "but I was raised to believe marriage might contain both duty and affection." "Then you were raised on fairy tales," he replied, turning toward the window. "Those fantasies have no place in this house. Your feelings," he pronounced the word as though it pained him, "are a weakness I cannot indulge." A chill seeped through Mirelle's veins. "You speak of my love as though it were a sin." The Duke's shoulders stiffened beneath his impeccable evening coat. "Perhaps it is. Love makes fools of sensible people. It destroys prudence, clouds judgment, and leaves chaos in its wake." His voice lowered, roughened. "I have seen it devour lives whole." Lightning illuminated his face, haunted, hollowed by old wounds. For an instant, Mirelle glimpsed not cruelty but fear in his expression. "Then I pity you, Your Grace," she said softly, "for condemning what you do not understand." He turned, his gaze piercing. "You presume much." "I observe much," she countered, a thread of steel beneath her gentle demeanor. "I see a man who has replaced his heart with principles." The Duke approached, each step measured, until he loomed before her. "Principles endure, Lady Mirelle. Feelings wither. Would you have me build our household upon shifting sands?" A single tear slipped unbidden down Mirelle's cheek. She did not move to wipe it away, allowing it to trace the curve of her jaw before falling silently to the floor. "Your tears will not move me," he said, though his voice wavered. Another tear followed, then another, silent messengers of a heart too full to contain its sorrow. She did not sob or plead. These were not weapons but wounds exposed before him. Something fractured in the Duke's expression, the faintest splinter in his armor. His hand lifted, hovering inches from her face before falling back to his side. "This conversation is concluded," he said, his voice oddly constrained. "We shall not speak of it again." As Mirelle turned to leave, her dignity wrapped about her like a cloak, she paused at the threshold. "So you may forbid discussion, Your Grace, but you cannot command the heart to be silent, not even your own." The door closed softly behind her, leaving the Duke alone with the storm, the untouched amber ribbon, and the lingering image of tears he had sworn would never move him. Morning light crept tentatively through the Abbey's stained glass windows, casting fractured rainbows across the breakfast parlour's Aubusson carpet. Mirelle sat alone, teacup untouched, watching mist rise from the moors beyond. A fortnight had passed since the library confrontation, 14 days of careful civility and measured distance. The housekeeper, Mrs. Haverley, entered with correspondence upon a silver tray. "His Grace received an urgent summons to London, my lady," she explained, her weathered face set in practiced neutrality. "He departed at first light and extends his regrets." Regrets. The word hung in the air, hollow as the Abbey's unused ballroom. Mirelle nodded, accepting the single envelope addressed in her sister's familiar hand. The Duke's absence should have provided relief, yet the vast house seemed only more oppressive without his presence. "Has His Grace indicated when he might return?" Mirelle inquired, breaking the seal on her letter. 3 days hence, my lady. The matter concerns the Whitley Orphanage Foundation. Of course. The Duke's charitable endeavours were legendary throughout the county. His generosity extended to everyone, except the wife who shared his name. Mirelle unfolded her sister's missive, scanning Catherine's spirited account of London's season. "His reputation precedes him," her sister wrote. "They call him the Winter Duke, brilliant, irreproachable, and utterly devoid of warmth. Society wonders what you've done to deserve such a match. I tell them you are precisely the sunlight his fortress requires." Sunlight. Mirelle gazed at the amber ribbon she'd retrieved from the library, now wound around her wrist beneath her sleeve. She had not abandoned hope, merely changed tactics. "Mrs. Haverley," she said suddenly, "might I examine the household ledgers today? As Duchess, I should familiarize myself with Lawnwick's operations." The housekeeper's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Certainly, my lady, though His Grace usually attends to such matters personally. Nevertheless, it seems prudent that I should understand our household affairs." Mirelle rose, smoothing her morning dress. "And perhaps you might introduce me to the staff more thoroughly. I've been remiss in my duties." Mrs. Haverley's expression softened marginally. "As you wish, my lady." The morning passed in quiet revolution. Mirelle toured the Abbey's vast kitchens, conversed with gardeners, and reviewed accounts with the steward. By afternoon, she had uncovered 3 children of staff members hiding their artistic talents, authorized new winter uniforms for the stable hands, and discovered the Duke's private study, a sanctuary none dared disturb. "His Grace works late into the night," Mrs. Haverley explained outside the locked door. "He permits no one to enter, not even for cleaning." Mirelle traced the ornate doorframe thoughtfully. What occupies him so thoroughly? His charitable foundations, correspondence with Parliament estate management. His Grace carries many responsibilities, and yet bears them entirely alone, Mirelle mused. Has he always been thus isolated? Mrs. Haverley's gaze darted away. "I've served Lawnwick 30 years, my lady. The Duke was different before the tragedy." "Tragedy?" The housekeeper's posture stiffened. "It is not my place to speak of it." That evening, Mirelle dined alone beneath the scrutiny of ancestral portraits. Later, she wandered the Abbey's east wing, where moonlight spilled through uncurtained windows. A pianoforte stood neglected in the music room, gathering dust like forgotten dreams. Impulsively, she seated herself at the instrument. Her fingers whispered across yellowed keys, releasing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata into air that had not known music in years. The plaintive melody echoed through empty corridors, a ghost of emotion haunting stone walls. On the 3rd morning of the Duke's absence, Mirelle entered the breakfast parlour to find Lady Riadne Velor, the Duke's aunt, awaiting her. The older woman's steel-grey eyes assessed Mirelle with clinical precision, her mouth a thin line of disapproval. "You've been making changes," Lady Riadne observed, declining tea with a flick of gloved fingers. Mirelle seated herself with deliberate grace. "Minor adjustments only. There is nothing minor about undermining established order. Thailand has managed Lawnwick impeccably for 17 years without feminine interference. Is it interference to know one's household? To acknowledge the people who maintain it?" Lady Riadne's gaze narrowed. "My nephew married you for propriety's sake, not partnership. Your father's disgrace required resolution. Thailand provided it, as befitting his position." Mirelle's fingers curled around her napkin. "And what position would that be, my lady? Benefactor, saviour, surely not husband." "You overstep, girl." Lady Riadne leaned forward. "Thailand has suffered enough from female manipulation. Your transparent attempts to insinuate yourself into his affections will not succeed. I seek not to manipulate, but to understand. There is nothing to understand beyond your duty. Provide an heir, maintain social obligations, and above all, respect the boundaries my nephew has established." Lady Riadne rose, a monument to aristocratic inflexibility. "His first marriage nearly destroyed him. I will not permit a second disaster." As Lady Riadne swept toward the door, Mirelle called after her, "What happened to his first wife?" The older woman paused, her profile severe against morning light. "She betrayed him in ways you cannot imagine. When she died, his heart was entombed with her." Her gaze pierced Mirelle like winter frost. "Do not disturb what lies buried, Lady Mirelle." Some ghosts are better left at rest. Lawnwick Abbey's great hall echoed with clipped footsteps as the Duke returned, afternoon shadows lengthening across heraldic flags and ancient weaponry. Mirelle awaited him at the foot of the grand staircase, composed in azure silk that complemented the gathering dusk. "Your Grace," she curtsied, noting the fatigue etched upon his features. "I trust London proved productive." The Duke paused, surprise flitting across his countenance before disciplined neutrality reclaimed its territory. Unexpectedly so. His gaze traveled the entrance hall, detecting subtle changes, fresh flowers where dusty arrangements had languished, windows uncovered to admit natural light. "You've been busy in my absence." "Merely attending to my responsibilities as Mistress of Lawnwick," she replied evenly. Something unreadable passed behind his eyes. "My aunt has informed me of your enthusiasm." "Lady Riadne was most educational," Mirelle said, carefully neutral. "She believes I should understand my place more thoroughly." "My aunt means well," the Duke offered, removing his gloves with methodical precision. "She has been Lawnwick's guardian since my parents' passing. And yours as well, I gather." His shoulders stiffened beneath his travelling coat. "She provided guidance when it was most required." A footman appeared to collect the Duke's hat and valise. Mirelle noted how the young man stood straighter, his demeanour markedly different from the subdued efficiency that had greeted her arrival months before. "Jenkins," the Duke acknowledged, surrendering his belongings. "Your mother recovers well?" The footman blinked, momentarily startled. "Yes, Your Grace. The physician Lady Mirelle summoned believes she will regain full strength by month's end." The Duke's gaze swung to Mirelle, questioning. "Mrs. Jenkins has served Lawnwick faithfully for 20 years, she explained. Her recovery seemed a household concern. "Indeed." The single word conveyed volumes of consideration. "We shall dine at 7, if that suits." "Perfectly, Your Grace." As the Duke ascended the staircase, Mirelle called softly, "I took the liberty of having fires lit in your study. The evening promises to be exceptionally cold." He paused mid-step, turning with peculiar hesitancy. "That was thoughtful." Dinner proceeded with uncharacteristic conversation. The Duke inquired about estate matters Mirelle had reviewed, listening with surprising attentiveness to her observations. When she mentioned the pianoforte's disrepair, his fork stilled momentarily against fine porcelain. "You play?" "Since childhood. Music was my mother's passion before her passing." Something softened in his expression. "Mine enjoyed the pianoforte as well." "Perhaps I might have the instrument restored," Mirelle ventured. The Duke considered, wine untouched beside his plate. "If it pleases you." Later, as footmen cleared away final courses, he broke their companionable silence. "I discovered you've arranged tutoring for the groundskeeper's children." Mirelle tensed, uncertain whether she'd overstepped. "They show remarkable aptitude. It seemed wasteful to leave such potential untended." "Using the Abbey's unused schoolroom was clever," he remarked, surprising her. "My mother established it for tenant children before education became fashionable among our peers." Emboldened, Mirelle leaned forward slightly. "Your mother sounds remarkable." She was. For an instant, the marble facade cracked, revealing glimpses of the man beneath. Lawnwick was different then, filled with... He trailed off, seeming to recollect himself. "Life," Mirelle suggested gently. His jaw tightened. "Sentiment," which proved ultimately destructive. The brief connection dissipated like mist before morning sun. He rose, formal once more. "Forgive me, but correspondence awaits." "Good evening, Lady Mirelle." She watched him retreat, shoulders rigid beneath immaculate tailoring. Progress, however minuscule, had been made. The following afternoon, while sketching in the conservatory, Mirelle encountered an unexpected visitor. Atherton Grain, the Duke's solicitor, appeared between tropical foliage, his thin smile unsettling as a shadow at twilight. "Lady Mirelle," he bowed, elegant fingers adjusting his crimson cravat. "How enchanting to find you among the orchids. They too require careful cultivation to thrive in inhospitable environments." Mirelle closed her sketchbook, instantly wary. "Mr. Grain, I was unaware you would be calling today." "Estate matters demand attention," he replied, seating himself uninvited. "His Grace relies upon my discretion in all things delicate." "How fortunate he has your counsel," she replied neutrally. Grain's gaze assessed her with uncomfortable scrutiny. "You've created quite the stir among the household. Unprecedented access to accounts, questioning established practices, even music where silence has reigned. Is proper management so revolutionary? It is when it contradicts His Grace's carefully constructed existence." Grain leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Lady Riadna fears you harbor romantic delusions about your position here. Heat flushed Mirelle's cheeks. My position is Duchess of Lawnwick, Mr. Grain. A title conveying responsibilities, not privileges. His smile never reached his eyes. His Grace has entrusted me with his most intimate confidences. I would be derelict in my duty if I failed to warn you. Sentiment destroyed him once before. He will not permit it a second victory. Mirelle's fingers curled around her pencil. You speak in riddles, sir. Then allow me clarity. The Duke's first wife betrayed him with his dearest friend. When discovered, she claimed love as justification for her sins. Grain's voice dripped with practiced concern. Their child, born soon after, carried another man's blood. The scandal nearly destroyed the Veras' name. Shock rendered Mirelle momentarily speechless. Why share this cruelty? To spare you greater pain. Grain rose, adjusting immaculate cuffs. The Duke married you to fulfill obligation, nothing more. Any attempt to breach his defenses will only confirm his darkest beliefs about feminine weakness. His parting smile gleamed like a blade. Good day, Lady Mirelle. I do hope your renovations bring satisfaction. They shall be your only reward at Lawnwick. That evening, the Duke found Mirelle in the library, her fingers tracing leather-bound spines without seeing titles. When she turned, the lamplight revealed eyes reddened from silent tears. You are distressed, he observed, his customary detachment wavering. Mr. Grain paid me a visit today, she replied simply. Understanding darkened his features. I see. Did you instruct him to warn me away from, what was his phrase, breaching your defenses? I did not. The Duke's voice held unexpected gentleness. Grain oversteps. Mirelle faced him fully. Is it true? About your first wife? Silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Finally he spoke, each word weighted with painful precision. Yes. The word hung between them. Yes. Simple, yet devastating in its confirmation. Mirelle's hands trembled as she sank into the nearest chair, her skirts settling like troubled waters. Why did you marry again? She asked, her voice barely audible above the library's crackling hearth. If betrayal wounded you so deeply, why risk repetition? The Duke remained standing, silhouetted against leaded windows where moonlight filtered through centuries-old glass. Duty, bloodline, obligation. Each word emerged precise, practiced. The Veras title requires continuation. So I am merely vessel for your heir? The question held no accusation, only a quiet seeking of truth. You were a suitable match. His fingers absently traced the carved mantelpiece. Your family's circumstances provided opportunity for mutual benefit. Mirelle studied him, this man of contradictions who built orphanages, yet starved his own heart of compassion. And if I should fail to produce an heir, would our arrangement be deemed worthless? Something fractured in his expression. I would not blame you for nature's caprice. Yet you blame yourself for your first wife's betrayal. The observation emerged gently, a physician's probe seeking the source of infection. The Duke's posture stiffened. You presume much. I observe much, she countered, rising to stand before him. Your aunt guards you like a wounded creature. Mr. Grain monitors your household like a sentinel. Lawnwick itself feels entombed in grief. These are not the actions surrounding a man who has made peace with his past. Peace? A bitter smile crossed his features. There is no peace in weakness, Lady Mirelle. Only vigilance against its return. Is that how you view love? As weakness? I view it as fantasy. Beautiful, intoxicating, and ultimately destructive. He moved toward the hearth, flame light etching harsh shadows across aristocratic features. My first marriage began with poetry and passion. It ended with my name dishonored, and a child that... His voice faltered before strengthening. A child that died bearing another man's features. Mirelle's heart contracted. The infant did not survive? Born too early, too fragile. Ancient pain resonated in each syllable. Perhaps merciful, considering the scandal that would have haunted its existence. And your wife? Childbed fever. She confessed everything before the end, her deception, her justifications. His hands curled into fists at his sides. She claimed love absolved her sins. That passion mattered more than vows or honor. Mirelle approached cautiously, as one might a wounded falcon. Her betrayal was unforgivable, but must it define all that follows? Must it condemn even the possibility of honest affection? Honest affection, he repeated, the words foreign on his tongue. A pretty phrase for dangerous sentiment. Not all who love betray, your grace. All who love are vulnerable to it. He turned, his gaze meeting hers with unexpected directness. I built Lawnwick's charitable foundations from the ashes of that vulnerability. I have helped hundreds through disciplined detachment. Would you have me risk that purpose for feelings? I would have you recognize that compassion without connection is incomplete. Mirelle gestured toward the library shelves. You've filled Lawnwick with books, but forbid their stories to touch you. You've preserved its beauty, but denied yourself its joy. Joy is transient. Principle endures. Yet without joy, what principles are worth preserving? Mirelle stepped closer, close enough to discern the faint scent of sandalwood and leather that surrounded him. You have judged me guilty of emotions you've forbidden yourself to feel. Something shifted in his expression, vulnerability quickly masked by practiced reserve. It grows late. We should retire. Running from conversation will not silence its truths. The Duke's jaw tightened. I do not run, Lady Mirelle. I exercise prudence. Is that what you call it? Unexpected fire sparked in her tone. I call it fear dressed as virtue. His eyes widened fractionally at her boldness. For a moment, she glimpsed the man beneath the title, uncertain, wounded, and dangerously close to feeling. You know nothing of my character, he said, voice roughened. I know you build orphanages, yet orphan your own heart. I know you defend widows, yet widow your own spirit. I know you demand honesty, yet lie to yourself daily. Mirelle's voice softened. And I know your eyes betray you when you claim indifference. The Duke stepped back as though physically struck. This conversation is concluded. Is it? Mirelle reached forward impulsively, her fingers barely brushing his sleeve, or merely beginning. He stared at her hand upon his arm, this simplest of human contacts that breached walls 17 years in construction. When he spoke, his voice emerged strange, almost hesitant. What do you want from me, Mirelle? Her given name spoken without title or distance, suspended between them like a bridge half-built. Permission, she answered simply. For what? To know you, not the Duke of Lawnwick, not the benefactor or the aristocrat. You, Duke of Veras. He shook his head slowly. There may be nothing left to know. I don't believe that. Her hand remained upon his sleeve, steady despite her racing heart. Neither, I think, do you. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 11 solemn notes, breaking the fragile moment. The Duke withdrew, composure reclaimed with visible effort. Rest well, Lady Mirelle. She watched him retreat, shoulders bearing invisible weight. At the threshold he paused, speaking without turning. The pianoforte will be tuned tomorrow. Play if it brings you comfort. After the door closed behind him, Mirelle remained motionless, her fingertips still warm from where they'd touched him. Beyond the windows, clouds parted, allowing moonlight to illuminate the amber ribbon she still carried, a slender bridge between what was and what might be. Autumn descended upon Lawnwick Abbey, painting its ancient gardens in amber and russet. Mirelle stood at her bedroom window, watching groundsmen clear fallen leaves from stone pathways below. 2 months had passed since the library confrontation, 60 days of gradual, almost imperceptible thawing. The pianoforte had been restored to perfection, its ivory keys gleaming beneath Mirelle's tentative fingers. Though the Duke rarely appeared during her practice sessions, servants whispered that he lingered in adjacent corridors, paperwork forgotten as Chopin's nocturnes filled previously silent halls. Small changes accumulated like snowflakes before an avalanche. The Duke now joined her for breakfast, their conversations cautiously expanding beyond household matters. He had surprised her with access to Lawnwick's magnificent conservatory, correctly deducing her passion for botanical illustration. When autumn rain confined her indoors, rare volumes of horticultural plates mysteriously appeared in the morning room. None of these gestures were accompanied by proclamations or sentimentality. The Duke maintained proper distance, his formal address never again slipping to her given name. Yet something had unquestionably shifted, like ice responding to the first breath of spring. A knock interrupted Mirelle's reverie. Mrs. Haverley entered, her usually stoic expression betraying uncharacteristic concern. Lady Riadne has arrived unexpectedly, my lady. She awaits you in the blue drawing room. Mirelle smoothed her morning dress, a simple creation of sage green wool unsuited for formal calls. Has His Grace been informed? His Grace departed for the Eastern Tenant Farms at dawn. The housekeeper's weathered hands twisted anxiously in her apron. Lady Riadne appears displeased. When is she otherwise? Mirelle murmured, then straightened her shoulders. Thank you, Mrs. Haverley. I shall attend her directly. The blue drawing room, a formal space rarely used under the Duke's solitary regime, sparkled with unexpected life. Fires blazed in twin hearths, Fresh flowers adorned marquetry tables, and damask curtains had been drawn back to admit autumn sunshine. Lady Riadne stood amid this renewal like a raven amidst butterflies, her black bombazine gown absorbing light rather than reflecting it. "Lady Riadne," Mirelle curtsied. "What a pleasant surprise." "Is it?" The older woman's steel-grey gaze swept critically across the rejuvenated chamber. "I find little pleasant about transformation without permission." Mirelle seated herself with deliberate composure. "Lawnwick is my home now. Surely a wife may arrange her household without seeking approval for every cushion." "Lawnwick is the ancestral seat of the Veras family," Lady Riadne corrected sharply. "Not your personal canvas for experimentation. I've merely opened windows and arranged flowers, not demolished the east wing," Mirelle replied, pouring tea with steady hands. "Cream?" Lady Riadne ignored the offered cup. "Do not pretend ignorance of your actions' implications. You've systematically dismantled 17 years of carefully established order. If by order you mean isolation and rigidity, then perhaps some dismantling was overdue." "Impertinent girl." Lady Riadne's gloved fingers tightened around her ebony walking stick. "Mr. Grain informed me of your conversation regarding Arabella, the Duke's first wife." Mirelle maintained her composure despite the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat. "What of it? You had no right to excavate that tragedy." "I did not excavate it. Your Mr. Grain wielded it as warning." Lady Riadne's nostrils flared slightly. "A necessary caution against your obvious designs." "And what designs would those be?" "To manipulate my nephew through feminine artifice." Lady Riadne leaned forward, lowering her voice to a hiss. "Atherton has observed your calculated performance, the music Thalen's mother once played, the botanical pursuits his sister enjoyed, the charitable endeavors that mirror his own. You study him like prey." Indignation flared within Mirelle's breast. "I seek to know my husband, not ensnare him. They are one and the same where Thalen is concerned." Lady Riadne rose, towering over the seated Mirelle. "Arabella destroyed him with similar tactics. Tears, music, professions of understanding. When she finished, the bright, trusting man I raised lay shattered." "Perhaps you've confused understanding with manipulation," Mirelle suggested quietly. "One heals, the other harms. How dare you presume—" "I presume nothing except the right to forge my own relationship with my husband." Mirelle stood, meeting the older woman's glare directly. "You have protected him admirably, Lady Riadne, but protection becomes prison when it prevents growth." "Growth?" Lady Riadne scoffed. "What you call growth, I recognize as vulnerability to further injury. And what you call protection, I recognize as fear petrified into principle." Mirelle gestured toward the sunlit garden beyond the windows. "Look outside, my lady. Nothing grows in darkness or isolation. Poetic sentiments do not alter fundamental truths. Thalen found purpose through discipline and detachment. Would you rob him of hard-won peace for your romantic fantasies? Is it peace to deny one's own heart, or slow suffocation disguised as virtue?" Lady Riadne's complexion paled beneath its customary pallor. "You know nothing of virtue, you calculating little—" "Lady Riadne," the Duke's voice, calm yet commanding, cut through the charged atmosphere. Both women turned toward the doorway where he stood, still wearing riding clothes dusted from the estate roads. His expression revealed nothing as he surveyed the tense tableau. "Thalen," Lady Riadne recovered first. "I was explaining certain historical matters to your wife, so I gathered." He entered fully mud-spattered boots incongruous against delicate Aubusson carpets, though your educational methods appear somewhat forceful. "Someone must speak plainly," Lady Riadne insisted. "Atherton reports disturbing developments." "Atherton should attend to legal matters rather than household gossip," the Duke interrupted, his tone cooling perceptibly. "As should you, Aunt." Lady Riadne drew herself up, affronted. "I have only your welfare at heart." "Then trust me to determine what that welfare requires." His gaze softened marginally. "You have been my staunchest defender, Aunt, but I am neither child nor invalid requiring constant guardianship." Color suffused the older woman's parchment cheeks. "You cannot expect me to stand idle while history threatens repetition. Not all repetition is tragedy." His eyes briefly met Mirelle's before returning to his aunt. "Now, I believe you mentioned plans to visit Lady Hatherton in Bath." The dismissal, however gently delivered, was unmistakable. Lady Riadne gathered her dignity like armor. "Very well. But remember, Thalen, sentiment led you to ruin once before." After she departed, silence expanded between husband and wife, neither quite meeting the other's gaze. "I apologize for my aunt's behavior," the Duke finally offered. "She means well, despite her methods." "She loves you," Mirelle acknowledged. Though perhaps too possessively, Riadne witnessed my darkest moments after Arabella's betrayal. His voice remained measured, controlled. She fears what she cannot protect me from. And what is that, Your Grace? His eyes met hers, revealing unexpected vulnerability. Myself, perhaps. November brought relentless rain that transformed Lawnwick's formal gardens into sodden labyrinths and turned country lanes to treacherous mud. Within the Abbey's stone embrace, however, Mirelle discovered unexpected warmth. The Duke had begun joining her for evening hours in the library, ostensibly attending to correspondence while she sketched or read. Their conversations, initially tentative, gradually expanded beyond pleasantries into genuine exchange. He spoke of parliamentary matters. She shared observations about tenant families. Though still formal, his manner had softened imperceptibly, like granite weathered by persistent rain. On this particular evening, wind howled against medieval stonework as they occupied opposite ends of a leather Chesterfield. The Duke reviewed estate ledgers while Mirelle completed botanical illustrations for the orphanage schoolroom. Between them rested a silver tray bearing chocolate and biscuits, a domestic comfort previously unimaginable. "The northern tenants report excellent harvests despite summer drought," he remarked, setting aside a steward's letter. "Your suggestion to rotate cropland proved prescient." Mirelle smiled without looking up from her watercolors. "My father may have lost his fortune, but his agricultural knowledge remained sound. You speak of him with affection despite his difficulties." "His financial mistakes arose from generosity, not vice," she replied, adding delicate veining to a painted oak leaf. "He believed the best of everyone, often to his detriment, a dangerous quality in this world." "Perhaps." She glanced up, meeting his gaze directly. "But I inherited his tendency to see goodness where others perceive only threat." Something shifted in the Duke's expression, discomfort mingled with reluctant admiration. "Your optimism remains intact despite considerable evidence against its wisdom. Is wisdom always cautious, never hopeful?" Before he could respond, a tremendous crash of thunder shook the Abbey's foundations. The library plunged into darkness as every lamp extinguished simultaneously. "Remain seated," the Duke instructed calmly. "The emergency lanterns will be brought shortly." Mirelle set aside her paintbrush, heart racing not from darkness, but from sudden intimacy. Without visual distraction, his presence intensified. The sound of his breathing, the subtle scent of sandalwood and leather, the rustle of fabric as he moved. Lightning illuminated the room in brilliant flashes, transforming familiar surroundings into otherworldly tableau. "Are you frightened?" he asked, his voice closer than expected. "No," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" The question lingered between them, weighted with meaning beyond physical darkness. Another lightning strike revealed him standing beside the fireplace, his expression unreadable. "Thalen," she said softly, using his given name for the first time. "What truly frightens you?" Silence stretched between thunderclaps. When he finally spoke, his voice emerged altered, stripped of aristocratic reserve. Repetition, weakness, the possibility that 17 years of discipline might prove insufficient against what? The library door opened before he could answer, servants entering with oil lamps that dispelled both darkness and confession. The Duke straightened, ducal composure restored, as if it had never faltered. "Jenkins, please escort Her Grace to her chambers," he instructed the footman. "This storm appears settled for the evening." Mirelle recognized the dismissal but chose defiance. "I prefer to remain until my painting dries." "Unless my company disturbs you." Their gazes locked across newly illuminated space, challenge offered and acknowledged. After a moment's consideration, the Duke dismissed the servants with a nod. When the door closed behind them, he remained standing, firelight casting his features in dramatic relief. "You should exercise greater caution, Lady Mirelle. In watercolors, they're hardly dangerous. In testing boundaries." He approached the abandoned Chesterfield, but did not sit. "My aunt's concerns, while overzealous, are not entirely unfounded. Because you fear I might make you feel something? Because I fear what such feeling might unleash." His hands clasped behind his back, knuckles whitening with tension. "You cannot understand what exists beneath the surface." Mirelle set aside pretense of painting. "Then help me understand." Thunder rumbled distantly as he considered her request. "When Arabella betrayed me, I did not respond with the cold dignity expected of my station." His voice dropped to near whisper. "I shattered, completely, publicly. The restraint you find so frustrating was hard won after months when I could barely function." "You grieved," Mirelle said gently. That shows humanity, not weakness. I destroyed priceless heirlooms, threatened her lover with physical violence, collapsed during a parliamentary session. Self-disgust colored each admission. Lady Riadne intervened before scandal became irreparable. So you built walls to prevent future pain. I built order from chaos, he corrected. Purpose from devastation. The foundations I've established help hundreds of deserving souls, while yours remains locked away. Mirelle rose, closing distance between them. Your work is admirable, Thalen, but charity without connection becomes mere transaction. Giving that costs nothing, because you've already surrendered everything that matters. His breath caught audibly. You presume much. I see much, she countered, echoing their earlier exchange. A man afraid that feeling might unmake all he's constructed, a heart that punishes itself for another's sins. Enough. The word emerged harsher than intended. No, Mirelle replied steadily. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Boldness born of genuine concern propelled her forward until barely a handspan separated them. You've sentenced yourself to emotional exile for crimes you never committed. This conversation is concluded, he stated, the familiar phrase hollow with repetition. Then conclude it properly, she challenged. Tell me honestly that you feel nothing, that my presence leaves you untouched, that when our hands meet passing correspondence your heart remains perfectly steady. Lightning illuminated his face, conflicted, vulnerable, human, beneath ducal authority. What would you have me say? Nothing, Mirelle whispered. I would have you stop saying nothing when everything within you struggles to speak. The amber ribbon, her first offering months ago, had somehow found its way into his hand. He stared at it as though it contained mysteries beyond comprehension. I cannot be what you need, he said finally, voice rough with emotion long suppressed. I don't ask for guarantees, she replied. Only possibility. His fingers closed around the ribbon, knuckles whitening. Possibility carries risk. All worthwhile things do. Mirelle reached forward, her fingertips brushing his closed hand. The question is whether the reward justifies the risk. And if it doesn't, then we face that outcome together with dignity and courage. Her voice softened. But what if it does, Thalen? What if everything you fear is merely shadow, not substance? The storm's fury began to subside, distant thunder marking its retreat across the moors. In its wake, silence expanded between them, not the cold silence of estrangement, but the fragile quiet of possibility. The Duke looked down at their nearly touching hands, the ribbon a slender bridge between separate worlds. When he finally spoke, his voice held wonder rather than certainty. I don't know how to begin. Mirelle's smile illuminated the shadowed library. Perhaps that's beginning enough. December draped Lawnwick Abbey in crystalline splendor. Frost etched intricate patterns across leaded windows, and evergreen boughs adorned with crimson ribbon replaced autumn flowers in grand halls. Change extended beyond seasonal decoration. The abbey had awakened from its 17-year slumber. Staff moved with lighter steps, responding to the gradual thawing of their master's demeanor. The Duke still maintained propriety, but small alterations accumulated like snowflakes. He joined Mirelle for daily walks through frost-glazed gardens. His study door occasionally remained ajar. Most significantly, he had begun asking questions about her childhood, her preferences, her dreams, tentative explorations into territory previously forbidden. Your father enjoyed Shakespeare? He inquired one evening as they shared companionable silence before the library hearth. Mirelle looked up from her embroidery, surprised by the personal inquiry. Passionately, he could recite entire scenes from memory. Which play was his favorite? The Winter's Tale, she replied, needle pausing mid-stitch. He found redemption in Leontes' journey from jealousy to wisdom. Something shadowed the Duke's expression. Her 16-year penance seems excessive punishment for misplaced suspicion. Perhaps, she conceded, but the reunion scene justified every measure of suffering. My father wept each time at Hermione's unveiling. Your father sounds unusually sentimental for a gentleman. He believed emotion enriched rather than diminished masculine strength. Mirelle studied her husband's profile, firelight softening aristocratic angles. What of your father? What literature moved him? The Duke's fingers stilled against leather armrests. Military histories, philosophical treatises, practical matters. Nothing that stirred the heart. His gaze remained fixed upon dancing flames. He considered sentimentality a feminine weakness, unbecoming to the Veras name. After a moment's hesitation, he added quietly, though I once discovered Wordsworth hidden beneath his ledgers. Mirelle smiled, imagining the austere patriarch secretly savouring poetry. "Which poem?" "Tintern Abbey," he replied, surprising her with his precision. The passage about thoughts too deep for tears was underlined in his hand. So the capacity for feeling existed beneath obligation. Perhaps. Something softened in his countenance. "I was 12 when he died. Much remained unspoken between us." The admission, simple yet profound in its vulnerability, hung between them like a fragile bridge. Mirelle sensed its significance and chose her response carefully. "Sometimes I believe those we've lost remain present in unexpected ways. Perhaps your charitable foundations honor not only duty, but his unexpressed compassion." The Duke considered her words, firelight reflecting in eyes no longer wintry, but thoughtful. An intriguing perspective. On the morning before Christmas Eve, Mirelle descended the grand staircase to discover unprecedented activity. Servants bustled about, carrying greenery, silver platters, and candelabra long stored in dusty attics. Mrs. Haverley supervised with clipboard in hand, her usually stoic expression betraying cautious excitement. "What's happening?" Mirelle inquired, bewildered by the transformation. The housekeeper curtsied briefly. "The annual children's fete, my lady. His Grace has reinstated it after—" She hesitated. 17 years, Mirelle completed gently. "Yes, my lady. Before circumstances changed, Lawnwick hosted orphans from His Grace's foundations each Christmas. The tradition ceased after—" Mrs. Haverley's voice trailed delicately into silence. "The Duke has decided to revive this tradition. Indeed, 36 children arrive tomorrow afternoon." Something like pride suffused the housekeeper's weathered features. "His Grace instructed that the celebration should match those his parents once held." Mirelle's heart quickened. "When was this decided?" "His Grace gave instructions yesterday evening, my lady. The staff worked through the night." Mrs. Haverley consulted her clipboard with newfound energy. "We've prepared the Great Hall for festivities, the children's dormitory in the East Wing, and the music room for caroling." "The music room?" Mirelle echoed, remembering dusty sheets and silence. "His Grace specifically mentioned your skill at the pianoforte, my lady. He suggested you might lead the singing if amenable." Emotion tightened Mirelle's throat. This gesture, this extension beyond private thawing into public restoration, signified more than any spoken declaration. She located the Duke in his study, door uncharacteristically open as he reviewed correspondence. Sunlight illuminated his profile, revealing the subtle changes recent months had wrought. Tension eased from his brow, shoulders less rigid beneath impeccable tailoring. "You've reinstated the children's celebration," she said from the threshold. He looked up, pen pausing above parchment. It seemed appropriate to restore certain traditions. 36 orphans descending upon Lawnwick represents considerable disruption to established order. His lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but its contemplation. Perhaps established order occasionally benefits from disruption. Mirelle entered fully, her heart too full for caution. "Why now, Thalen?" He set down his pen, considering the question with uncharacteristic openness. "Last night I found myself in the portrait gallery, studying my parents' likenesses. They created Lawnwick, as sanctuary, not mausoleum. I've preserved its structure while neglecting its purpose. And that purpose was life," he said simply, "in all its messiness and unpredictability." Their gazes held, unspoken understanding flowing between them. Mirelle approached his desk, fingertips lightly touching its polished surface. "I would be honored to play for the children. They will appreciate your talent far more than my austere selections." He hesitated before adding, "I've taken the liberty of inviting your sister Catherine to join us. The invitation may arrive too late, but it seemed proper." "You invited my sister for Christmas?" Astonishment rendered Mirelle momentarily speechless. "Without consulting me? Have I overstepped?" Uncertainty flickered across his features. This powerful man suddenly vulnerable before the possibility of error. "No," she reassured him quickly. "You've given me the most precious gift imaginable." Relief softened his expression. "Then perhaps you might assist with one additional matter." He indicated an open ledger. "I find myself uncertain regarding appropriate gifts for 36 children of varying ages. Your guidance would prove invaluable." Mirelle's smile illuminated the formally somber study. "I believe we might manage something suitable together." Christmas Eve transformed Lawnwick completely. The great hall blazed with candlelight reflecting from silver ornaments and crystal goblets. Evergreen garlands scented the air with forest freshness, while roaring fires in massive hearths banished winter's chill. Most remarkably, children's laughter, 36 distinct voices, ranging from toddler giggles to adolescent excitement, echoed through previously silent corridors. The Duke presided over festivities with unexpected grace, his customary reserve softened by genuine enjoyment. He introduced each child by name to assembled staff, listened attentively to their stories, and somehow remembered individual details about each one's progress in studies or particular talents. Young Thomas has developed remarkable aptitude for mathematics, he informed Mirelle as a tow-headed boy of perhaps 10 returned to his companions. His calculations already surpass his tutors. You know them all so well, she observed, watching his gaze follow the children with something approaching paternal pride. I review their quarterly reports personally, he admitted. Though this is the first time he hesitated. Allowed yourself to know them as people rather than responsibilities. Something vulnerable crossed his features before he nodded. Precisely. Later in the music room, Mirelle played Christmas carols while children's voices rose in enthusiastic, if occasionally off-key harmony. The Duke stood near the doorway, observing rather than participating, until 7-year-old Elizabeth approached with determined courage. Please, Your Grace, she curtsied with endearing awkwardness. Won't you sing with us? The room quieted, servants and children alike holding collective breath at such unprecedented boldness. The Duke appeared momentarily paralyzed by the simple request, his expression flickering between instinctive withdrawal and something new, something willing to risk imperfection. His gaze sought Mirelle's across the crowded room. She smiled encouragement, fingers poised above ivory keys. I fear my voice lacks proper training, he replied to Elizabeth, his tone gentler than any had heard before. But perhaps I might attempt a modest contribution. Quiet gasps circulated among long-time staff as the Duke of Lawnwick allowed himself to be led toward the pianoforte by a slip of a girl in borrowed finery. Mirelle shifted on the bench, making space beside her, as 36 children watched wide-eyed. When his rich baritone joined the chorus of God Rest You Merry Gentlemen, Mirelle's fingers nearly faltered upon the keys. The Duke sang with unexpected proficiency, his voice carrying the melody with dignified restraint that gradually warmed as verse followed verse. As music filled the long, silent room, Mrs. Haverley discreetly wiped tears from weathered cheeks. Jenkins the footman exchanged wondering glances with kitchen staff. The housekeeper leaned toward her husband, whispering words that circulated swiftly among servants who had witnessed 17 years of silent grief. Lawnwick lives again. After the children's celebration concluded, after presents had been distributed, Christmas dinner consumed with astonishing enthusiasm, and 36 exhausted orphans tucked into beds throughout the East Wing, Lawnwick Abbey settled into peaceful stillness. Snowflakes drifted past leaded windows, illuminated by the last flickers of holiday candles. The Duke found Mirelle in the library, seated before embers that cast golden light across her features. She had changed from formal evening attire into simpler garments, a high-necked gown of deep emerald velvet, her hair loosened from elaborate coiffure to cascade down her back in chestnut waves. You should rest, he observed from the threshold, still wearing formal evening dress minus jacket and cravat. Tomorrow brings Christmas services and Catherine's possible arrival. Mirelle smiled without turning. I find myself unwilling to relinquish this day quite yet. Something in her voice, contentment mingled with wistfulness, drew him further into the room. He approached the hearth, studying dancing flames rather than her features. Did the celebration meet your expectations? It exceeded them immeasurably. She glanced up, her expression softened by firelight. Though I suspect the children's joy affected you more profoundly than anticipated. Their resilience is remarkable, he acknowledged. Despite circumstances that might justify bitterness, they retain capacity for wonder. Children often demonstrate wisdom we forget with age. The Duke considered her words, one hand absently tracing the mantelpiece. I have been pondering young Thomas's question during dinner. Which one? He proved quite inquisitive. He asked why Lawnwick Abbey appears in both summer and winter in the entrance hall paintings, but never spring. A faint smile touched his lips. An astute observation I've overlooked for decades. And what conclusion did you reach? That perhaps my father commissioned only seasons reflecting his temperament. The Duke's voice softened with remembrance. Winter's austerity and summer's industry, virtues he esteemed. Spring's rebirth and autumn's reflection held less practical value, yet both remain essential to nature's completion. Indeed, he seated himself in the companion chair, their conversation easier now in the day's quiet aftermath. The children's presence illuminated absences I've grown accustomed to ignoring. Mirelle studied his profile, noting subtle transformations these past months had wrought. Tension eased from his brow, mouth less stern, something awakening behind eyes previously guarded. What absences? Laughter, spontaneity, the chaos inherent in genuine connection. He gazed into dying embers. I convinced myself such elements threatened rather than enhanced Lawnwick's purpose. And now? The Duke turned toward her fully, his expression remarkably unguarded. Now I find myself questioning many long-standing certainties. Silence expanded between them, comfortable rather than strained. Mirelle reached beside her chair, retrieving a small package wrapped in simple cream paper, tied with the amber ribbon, her first offering, seemingly ages past. I have something for you, she said softly, extending the gift, though perhaps presumptuous without prior discussion. The Duke accepted the package with visible hesitation, as though unaccustomed to receiving rather than providing. I believed gift exchanges occurred tomorrow morning. This seemed better suited to quieter moments. Mirelle watched as his fingers carefully untied the ribbon, preserving rather than breaking it. Within the paper lay a leather-bound journal of modest size and exceptional craftsmanship. The Duke opened its cover, discovering blank pages of finest quality, interspersed with pressed botanicals from Lawnwick's gardens, flowers, leaves and herbs Mirelle had collected throughout changing seasons. The first page contains explanation, she offered as he turned parchment leaves with growing wonder. His gaze found elegant script on the opening sheet. For thoughts too deep for tears and moments worth preserving, may Lawnwick's gardens, both physical and spiritual, flourish under your stewardship. The Duke traced Wordsworth's phrase, his father's secret preference, with reverent fingertip. How did you create this? The bookbinder in the village assisted with binding, the botanicals I've collected since arriving. Mirelle hesitated before adding, I noticed you write endlessly for duty, but never for yourself. I've considered personal reflection self-indulgent, he admitted, still examining the journal's craftsmanship. Or perhaps you feared what honesty might reveal. His gaze lifted to hers, startled by her perception. After a moment's consideration, he nodded once, a simple acknowledgement that would have been impossible months before. Discipline provided sanctuary when introspection threatened discomfort. Yet without reflection, how can growth occur? A valid question I've conveniently avoided. His fingers continued exploring the journal, touching pressed lavender, thyme, and foxglove with unexpected tenderness. This represents considerable effort. Worthwhile effort, she corrected gently. The Duke closed the journal, holding it with peculiar reverence. I have something for you as well, though I intended its presentation tomorrow among more appropriate festivity. I would treasure it now, Mirelle answered, when we might speak freely. He reached inside his waistcoat, withdrawing a small parcel wrapped in silver paper. This may prove excessively sentimental, he warned, uncharacteristic uncertainty coloring his tone. If so, please attribute the lapse to seasonal influence. Mirelle accepted his offering, fingers brushing his momentarily during the exchange. The paper contained a velvet box which opened to reveal an exquisite brooch, amber stones arranged as petals around a central pearl set in antique gold filigree. It belonged to my mother, the Duke explained quietly. The design represents sun breaking through winter cloud. A rather heavy-handed metaphor, I realize now. It's beautiful, Mirelle whispered, genuinely moved by both the gift's beauty and its significance. She wore it during happier times at Lawnwick, he continued, watching her reaction carefully. I've kept it locked away since her passing, another memory deemed too painful for practical consideration. Mirelle traced the delicate metalwork reverently. I'm honored beyond words. The honor belongs to the brooch, he replied, voice deepening with emotion he no longer struggled to suppress. It deserves sunlight after decades in darkness. Their gazes met across dwindling firelight, the simple exchange of gifts communicating truths neither yet dared articulate. Outside, snow continued falling, transforming Lawnwick's austere architecture into something softer, more forgiving. Mirelle, the Duke began, her name emerging naturally now without title or distance. These past months have... A sharp knock interrupted his words. Jenkins appeared at the threshold, his expression apologetic yet urgent. Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace, but a carriage has arrived despite the weather. Lady Catherine Solence requests immediate entrance. Mirelle rose in delighted surprise. Catherine came tonight? In this snow? Indeed, my lady. The lady appears distressed. The Duke stood immediately, domestic intimacy replaced by aristocratic authority. Show her to the blue drawing room. Have fires lit and refreshments prepared. We shall attend her directly." After Jenkins departed, he turned to Mirelle with genuine concern. "Your sister travelled dangerous roads in darkness and snowfall. Something significant must have occurred." "Catherine has always been impulsive," Mirelle replied, though worry creased her brow, "but never foolish without cause." They found Catherine pacing before a hastily built fire, her travelling cloak still dusted with snow, cheeks flushed from cold and evident agitation. When Mirelle entered, her younger sister rushed forward, embracing her with uncharacteristic desperation. "Thank heaven you're here," Catherine gasped, then remembered propriety and curtsied belatedly to the Duke. "Your Grace, forgive my unseemly arrival." "Circumstances clearly warranted urgency," he replied, studying her distress with growing concern. "Please be seated. Refreshments arrive shortly." Catherine sank into the nearest chair, exhaustion evident beneath fashionable attire and careful cosmetics. At 20, she embodied sophisticated London elegance that contrasted sharply with Mirelle's simpler country aesthetic. "What's happened?" Mirelle asked, seating herself beside her sister. "Your letter mentioned nothing about Christmas travel, because I had no intention of coming until yesterday." Catherine glanced nervously toward the Duke, clearly uncertain about speaking freely in his presence. He recognized her hesitation immediately. "Perhaps you require privacy for family matters. I can withdraw—" "No," Catherine interrupted with surprising vehemence. "You should hear this directly, Your Grace. It concerns your household intimately." The Duke's expression hardened with sudden wariness. "Explain." Catherine withdrew a crumpled letter from her reticule, hands trembling slightly. "This arrived yesterday from Mr. Atherton Grain. He suggested I might intercede with Mirelle regarding certain matters he finds concerning." The Duke's jaw tightened visibly. "May I?" He extended his hand for the correspondence, which Catherine surrendered without hesitation. As he read, his complexion paled beneath its natural olive tone. When he finished, the letter crumpled within his fist. "Unconscionable," he pronounced, voice dangerously controlled. "What does it say?" Mirelle asked, alarmed by his reaction. Catherine answered when the Duke remained silent with barely contained fury. "Mr. Grain suggests you've been manipulating His Grace through feminine artifice. He claims your intentions mirror those of the First Duchess, with similar destructive potential." He dared compare— The Duke checked himself, visible effort controlling his response. "Forgive me. Please continue." "He suggests I might persuade you to adopt more appropriate behavior before—" Catherine hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Before what?" Mirelle prompted. "Before His Grace recognizes your calculated seduction and takes measures to protect himself and the Veras' legacy." Catherine's voice dropped to near whisper. "He implies legal separation might become necessary." The blue drawing room fell silent, save for crackling flames and winter wind against leaded windows. Mirelle sat perfectly still, Catherine's revelations suspended between them like poisoned ether. The Duke stood with his back to both women, shoulders rigid beneath fine linen, the crumpled letter trembling in his clenched fist. "I came immediately," Catherine continued into the strained silence, "not because I believed a word of his vile insinuations, but because such allegations from His Grace's solicitor suggested imminent danger to your position." "Mr. Grain wrote this without my knowledge or authorization," the Duke stated, each word precise and terrible in its restraint. "His presumption is inexcusable." Mirelle found her voice at last, surprisingly steady despite the shock. "Did he mention Lady Riadne in his correspondence?" Catherine nodded. He cited her concerns repeatedly, suggesting they shared apprehensions about your influence. "My aunt has overstepped grievously," the Duke pronounced, turning to face them with carefully controlled fury evident in every line of his bearing, "as has Grain." "The letter suggests they believe themselves acting in your interest," Catherine observed cautiously, "that they protect you from repeating past difficulties." "They protect nothing except their own authority." The Duke's gaze softened as it fell upon Mirelle's pale features. "Are you unwell?" "Merely processing unexpected developments," she replied with remarkable composure, "though I admit some confusion regarding Mr. Grain's extraordinary presumption." The Duke hesitated, internal conflict visible in his expression, before resolution settled across aristocratic features. "Grain oversteps because I once granted him excessive latitude during darker periods. After Arabella's betrayal, I surrendered many personal matters to his management, while focusing exclusively on parliamentary obligations and charitable foundations." "He managed your household?" Catherine asked, curiosity overcoming propriety. He managed considerably more, the Duke acknowledged grimly. Financial, legal and personal affairs, including correspondence and social engagements. Lady Riadne oversaw domestic matters, while Grain controlled external concerns. Understanding dawned in Mirelle's expression. You created a barrier between yourself and potential pain. I created a prison, he corrected quietly. One I convinced myself represented freedom from weakness. And now they resist its dismantling, she concluded. Precisely. The Duke moved to stand before the hearth, firelight etching harsh shadows across his features. Grain and my aunt constructed elaborate justifications for controlling my existence. Your presence threatens arrangements they've spent 17 years perfecting. Catherine glanced between them, clearly reassessing her understanding of their marriage. Then you don't consider Mirelle's influence inappropriate? Something remarkable transformed the Duke's countenance, stern lines softening, eyes warming with emotion he no longer struggled to conceal. Your sister's influence represents salvation, not danger. She has restored light to halls deliberately kept shadowed. Mirelle's breath caught audibly at this unprecedented acknowledgement. The Duke continued, addressing her directly now. I owe you considerable apology for allowing such interference to continue unchallenged. My silence granted tacit permission for their manipulation. You couldn't challenge what remained unrecognized, she replied gently. Nevertheless, this ends tonight. He straightened, ducal authority flowing through every line of his bearing. Grain services are terminated, effective immediately. Lady Riadne shall receive correspondence clarifying boundaries she must respect henceforth. Catherine's eyes widened at his decisiveness. Such dramatic steps on Christmas Eve. Appropriate timing, the Duke replied with grim satisfaction. A season of renewal deserves house-cleaning. Servants entered bearing refreshments, temporarily halting their conversation. After attendants departed, the Duke addressed practical concerns with newfound openness. Lady Catherine, you're welcome at Lawnwick for the duration of your choosing. Appropriate chambers have been prepared in anticipation of your arrival, though admittedly we expected you tomorrow. I appreciate your hospitality, Your Grace, Catherine replied, studying him with undisguised curiosity, though I confess surprise at finding circumstances vastly different from London gossip. Society rarely penetrates truth beneath convenient narratives, he observed dryly. I've contributed to misperceptions through deliberate isolation. The Winter Duke, Catherine mused, using society's nickname without thinking. Surprisingly, his lips curved into genuine amusement. An apt designation, though perhaps requiring seasonal adjustment. This subtle jest, unprecedented from a man legendary for austerity, rendered Catherine momentarily speechless. Mirelle intervened smoothly, suggesting her sister might appreciate rest after her journey. After Catherine departed with Mrs. Haverley, the Duke and Duchess remained alone before dying embers. You intend to dismiss Mr. Grain immediately? Mirelle asked, breaking contemplative silence. Without question or compromise. The Duke's expression hardened with renewed determination. His interference extends beyond professional boundaries into unconscionable presumption. And Lady Riadne? Something softened in his countenance. My aunt requires firmer boundaries rather than banishment. Her motivations, while misguided, stem from genuine concern rather than self-interest. You're remarkably charitable towards someone who conspired to undermine your marriage. She witnessed devastation few others saw, he replied quietly. Her methods are indefensible, but her fears aren't entirely irrational. Mirelle studied him thoughtfully. You've never directly addressed what happened after Arabella's betrayal, only oblique references to darker periods and devastation. The Duke's gaze remained fixed upon fading coals. For several moments, Mirelle believed he would retreat behind customary reserve. When he finally spoke, his voice emerged altered, stripped of aristocratic detachment. I loved Arabella with youthful absolutism, completely, blindly, foolishly. Each word emerged carefully, as though extracted from profound depths. When her betrayal emerged, something fundamental shattered within me. Not merely pride or expectation, though both suffered grievously, but basic trust in my own judgment. You couldn't reconcile the woman you believed you knew with her actions, Mirelle suggested gently. Precisely. He turned toward her, firelight revealing vulnerability few had witnessed. I built Lawnwick's charitable foundations as penance for catastrophic misjudgment. Each orphanage, hospital, and school represented atonement for allowing emotion to override reason. You punished yourself for another's sins. I protected myself and others from my own capacity for self-deception, he corrected. At least that's how I justified systematic withdrawal from genuine connection. Mirelle rose, approaching him with quiet courage. And now? The Duke regarded her steadily, something profound shifting behind winter sea eyes. Now I find myself questioning whether protection without risk constitutes living or merely existence. What changed your perspective? You, he answered simply. Your persistent belief that connection strengthens rather than diminishes. Your refusal to accept artificial limitations as immutable boundaries. Mirelle's heart quickened beneath her gown. And do you still consider my love a sin? I consider it undeserved grace, he replied, voice deepening with emotion no longer suppressed. Though I've done nothing to merit such generosity of spirit. Grace requires no merit, she countered gently, only acceptance. Their gazes held across dwindling firelight, possibilities expanding between them like flowering vines through winter frost. Before either could speak further, Jenkins appeared at the threshold, his expression apologetic yet urgent. Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace, but Mr. Grain has arrived despite the hour and weather. He insists upon immediate audience regarding matters of extreme urgency. The Duke's expression hardened instantly. Indeed, perfect timing. Shall I inform him you're indisposed? Jenkins suggested, clearly anticipating rejection. No. Determination settled across the Duke's features like winter frost. Show him to my study immediately. This confrontation is long overdue. Thalen, Mirelle cautioned, using his given name unconsciously. Perhaps waiting until morning would provide clearer perspective. Clarity has finally emerged after 17 years of convenient shadows, he replied, surprising her with gentle fingers briefly touching her cheek. Rest assured I face this conversation with complete conviction regarding its necessity. After he departed, Mirelle remained before dying embers, fingers absently touching the spot where his hand had rested. Outside, snow continued falling, transforming Lawnwick's austere architecture into something gentler, more forgiving. Within its ancient walls, transformation of another kind had begun, not merely between husband and wife, but within a man long frozen by past betrayal. My lady, Mrs. Haverley appeared at the threshold. Lady Catherine is settled comfortably. Might I escort you to your chambers? The hour grows exceedingly late. Mirelle hesitated, glancing toward the corridor leading to the Duke's study. His Grace is engaged with unexpected business. Understanding softened the housekeeper's weathered features. Mr. Grain has overreached himself considerably. His Grace will address matters appropriately. You heard? Servants hear everything, my lady, Mrs. Haverley replied with dignified candor, particularly servants who have witnessed 17 years of Mr. Grain's increasing presumption. Was it truly so severe? The housekeeper's expression reflected decades of loyal observation. After the first Duchess's betrayal, His Grace retreated into work while Mr. Grain gradually assumed control of correspondence, appointments, even visitor access. Lady Riadna managed domestic matters with similar authority. They created a barrier between him and potential pain, Mirelle murmured, echoing her earlier assessment. They created a cage, Mrs. Haverley corrected quietly. One His Grace mistook for necessary structure until recent months. The implication behind recent months hung between them. Mirelle's arrival had catalyzed transformation within Lawnwick's master that radiated throughout his household. The housekeeper's next words confirmed this understanding. The staff has observed His Grace's evolution with considerable satisfaction, she admitted, professional reserve momentarily yielding to genuine emotion. Lawnwick has waited many years for its heart to beat again. Christmas morning arrived with pristine brilliance, sunlight transforming Lawnwick's snow-draped grounds into a landscape of diamonds. Mirelle stood at her chamber window, watching staff clear pathways for carriages expected later. The Duke had invited local gentry to afternoon services in Lawnwick's private chapel, followed by modest Christmas festivities. Her thoughts remained occupied by last night's developments. The Duke had not sought her after his confrontation with Grain, though Jenkins reported the solicitor's hasty departure shortly before midnight. What transpired between them remained unknown, the Duke having retired directly to his chambers afterward. A gentle knock preceded Catherine's entrance, her younger sister already dressed in festive burgundy silk, despite the early hour. "Happy Christmas," she greeted, embracing Mirelle with uncharacteristic warmth, though I confess curiosity outweighs seasonal sentiment this morning. Regarding the remarkable transformation in your husband, Catherine settled upon a window seat, studying Mirelle with newfound respect. Society portrays him as carved from winter granite. Last night revealed a man capable of both passion and tenderness. Mirelle smiled, selecting a gown of forest green velvet from her wardrobe. The Duke is considerably more complex than society's convenient narratives suggest. Clearly, Catherine's expression turned serious. That odious solicitor's dismissal, it did occur, I presume? I haven't received confirmation, Mirelle admitted, allowing her lady's maid to begin arrangement of her hair. His Grace retired without further discussion after their meeting. A pity. I'd have relished witnessing Graine's humiliation. Catherine smoothed invisible wrinkles from her skirts. The man's presumption borders on criminal. His loyalty became distorted over time, Mirelle suggested charitably. The Duke granted him authority during vulnerable periods that eventually transformed into entitlement. Catherine studied her sister with dawning comprehension. You genuinely care for him. Is that so remarkable, given circumstances of your marriage? Extraordinarily so. Catherine leaned forward, voice lowering conspiratorially. London buzzes with speculation regarding the Winter Duke's second marriage. Some wagered you wouldn't last 6 months before fleeing his frigidity. Gossip rarely penetrates truth, Mirelle replied, echoing the Duke's assessment from the previous evening. Indeed. Catherine's gaze turned contemplative. Though in fairness, I arrived expecting to rescue you from aristocratic imprisonment. Instead, I find you content. More than content, Mirelle acknowledged softly, though our path has hardly been straightforward. Before Catherine could respond, Mrs. Haverley appeared at the doorway. His Grace requests both ladies join him in the morning room when convenient. Breakfast awaits. They found the Duke dressed in formal morning attire, reviewing correspondence beside windows overlooking snow-laden gardens. He rose as they entered, seasonal warmth evident in his greeting despite customary propriety. Happy Christmas, he offered, genuine rather than perfunctory. I trust accommodations proved satisfactory, Lady Catherine. Exceptionally so, Your Grace, Catherine curtsied, studying him with undisguised curiosity, though I admit surprise at Lawnwick's transformation since my sister's letters from early autumn. Transformation occurs in many forms, he acknowledged, gesturing toward the breakfast table where seasonal delicacies awaited, some more visible than others. As they settled into surprisingly comfortable conversation, Mirelle observed subtle changes in her husband's demeanor, tension absent from his shoulders, occasional warmth touching winter-sea eyes, genuine interest in Catherine's London anecdotes. When servants departed after serving, he addressed last night's confrontation without preamble. Mr. Graine's association with Lawnwick has concluded, he stated, meeting Mirelle's gaze directly. Effective immediately and irrevocably. He accepted dismissal gracefully, Catherine inquired, skepticism evident in her tone. Hardly. A grim smile touched the Duke's lips. He suggested temporary emotional aberration had compromised my judgment, offering to manage affairs until reason returned. Mirelle set down her teacup, shocked by such presumption. Extraordinary arrogance. Born of 17 years' unchallenged authority, the Duke acknowledged. My complicity granted him domain that rightfully belonged to, he hesitated before finishing quietly, to us. The simple pronoun us, rather than formal titles, conveyed profound transformation neither woman missed. Catherine glanced between them, reassessing her understanding of their marriage. What of Lady Ariadne? Mirelle asked carefully. She receives correspondence this morning clarifying boundaries. His expression softened marginally. Though firmer limitations need not preclude familial affection, her intentions, however misguided, stem from genuine concern rather than self-interest. Unlike Graine, Catherine observed tartly. Indeed. The Duke set aside his napkin, expression turning unexpectedly hesitant. If you'll forgive a momentary digression from seasonal matters, I've reached several decisions requiring implementation before tomorrow's guests arrive. Both women regarded him expectantly as he continued with careful precision. First, Lawnwick's charitable foundations require reorganization. Rather than independent entities under Graine's oversight, they shall be consolidated under family management. A significant undertaking, Mirelle observed, which I hope might interest you, he replied, surprising her. Your organizational insights regarding tenant matters suggest administrative capabilities I've failed to properly acknowledge or utilize. Mirelle's eyes widened slightly. You wish me to participate in foundation management? I wish us to manage them together, he clarified, as equal partners rather than isolated entities. The significance of this offer, extension beyond domestic authority into his most valued work, rendered Mirelle momentarily speechless. Catherine observed their exchange with growing fascination. Second, the Duke continued when Mirelle remained silent, Lawnwick requires significant social revival. 17 years of isolation has damaged community connections vital to both our position and the region's welfare. You propose entertainment? Catherine inquired, barely concealing her astonishment. Judicious re-engagement, he corrected, beginning with tonight's modest gathering and expanding gradually through winter into spring. Mirelle found her voice at last, a considerable departure from established patterns. Patterns requiring disruption, he acknowledged, meeting her gaze directly. For reasons we might discuss more privately. The charged moment between them prompted Catherine to rise tactfully. I should prepare correspondence for London friends before chapel, if you'll excuse me. After she departed, silence expanded between husband and wife, not uncomfortable tension but expectant possibility. The Duke rose, moving toward windows overlooking snow-covered gardens where orphans played under servants' watchful supervision. I owe you considerable apology, he began, back still turned, for allowing Grain's interference, for Lady Riadna's presumption, for my own stubborn resistance to what you've offered since arriving. No apology needed, Mirelle replied gently. Healing follows its own timeline, not external expectations. He turned then, winter sunlight illuminating features no longer guarded by aristocratic reserve. Grain made revelations during our confrontation that require acknowledgement. What revelations? He intercepted correspondence intended for you these past months, the Duke admitted, controlled anger evident beneath his composure. Letters from Catherine from your father, even invitations from local families, all redirected through his office for evaluation before selective delivery. Shock rendered Mirelle momentarily speechless. He isolated me deliberately? With Lady Riadna's tacit approval, he confirmed grimly. They constructed barriers between us under pretense of protecting Lawnwick's interests, while actually preserving their authority, she concluded, understanding dawning fully. Precisely. The Duke approached, stopping before her chair. Their interference extended beyond correspondence to household management, staff directives, even misleading reports about your activities. To what purpose? To prevent precisely what has occurred despite their efforts. He regarded her steadily, vulnerability evident beneath ducal composure. The restoration of Lawnwick's heart through genuine connection. The simple acknowledgement, direct rather than veiled in metaphor, stole Mirelle's breath. When she remained silent, the Duke continued with newfound openness. Last night's confrontation forced recognition of truths I've avoided since you arrived. His voice deepened with emotion no longer suppressed. You asked months ago what frightened me. I can answer now with complete honesty. Tell me, she whispered. Not pain, he replied quietly. Nor betrayal, though both seemed sufficiently terrifying. What truly frightened me was the possibility of redemption I didn't deserve. Thalen, please, he interrupted gently. Allow me to finish while courage remains. He knelt beside her chair, an unprecedented gesture that shocked her more than words. I convinced myself emotional detachment represented strength rather than cowardice, that isolation protected noble purpose rather than wounded pride. Mirelle remained silent, understanding the profound significance of this moment for a man who had locked away vulnerability for 17 years. You challenged those convenient fictions from your first day at Lawnwick, he continued, not through confrontation but through persistent grace that illuminated shadows I'd deliberately cultivated. The Duke rose, extending his hand to Mirelle in silent invitation. When she accepted, he led her toward windows overlooking snow-covered gardens where orphans built snowmen beneath ancient oaks. Their laughter drifted upward, crystalline in winter sunlight. I told Grain last night that his services concluded not merely because of his interference, but because Lawnwick no longer requires artificial barriers against authentic connection. The Duke's voice remained steady, despite the profound shift his words represented. I choose to face both risk and possibility directly, rather than through proxy management. A significant transformation, Mirelle observed, studying his profile as he watched the children below. Catalyzed by your presence, he acknowledged, though I resisted with considerable determination. Why did you marry again? She asked quietly, returning to her original question from months before. If emotional attachment represented such danger, why risk repetition? The Duke considered her question with newfound honesty. Initially, practical considerations governed the decision. bloodline continuation, social obligation, advantageous connections through your father's political associations, despite his financial difficulties. Entirely pragmatic, she noted without bitterness. So I believed, he agreed. Yet something deeper influenced my choice, though I refused acknowledgement until recently. What deeper motivation? Hope, he admitted simply. Buried beneath rational justifications and rigid control, some essential part of me recognized unsustainability in the life I'd constructed. The foundations help many deserving souls, yet provide nothing for the man behind them. Mirelle's fingers tightened unconsciously around his. And now? Now I recognize what you've understood since arriving. His gaze shifted from the gardens to her face, vulnerability evident beneath aristocratic features. That emotional courage represents strength rather than weakness. That connection enhances rather than diminishes purpose. Chapel bells chimed softly in the distance, reminding them of approaching Christmas services. The Duke glanced toward the clock before continuing with surprising determination. Before obligations claim our attention, there remains something essential requiring address. His voice deepened with emotion he no longer struggled to suppress. Something I've denied through silence, distance, and deliberate misrepresentation. Mirelle's heart quickened beneath forest green velvet. What truth requires such dramatic acknowledgement? That I love you. The simple declaration, 3 words without qualification or reservation, hung between them like morning sunlight breaking through winter cloud. Mirelle's breath caught audibly, her composure momentarily fractured by unexpected directness. Despite every barrier constructed against such possibility, the Duke continued, his voice gaining certainty with each word, despite 17 years of deliberate emotional entombment, despite Grain's interference and my own stubborn resistance. Thalen, she whispered, using his given name naturally now. I cannot promise perfection, he cautioned, ever the pragmatist even in transformation. Habits formed over nearly 2 decades will not vanish immediately. There will be moments when old patterns reassert themselves through instinct rather than intention. I expect no magical transformation, Mirelle assured him. Only honest effort, that I can promise without reservation. His hands enclosed hers completely now, the gesture simultaneously protective and vulnerable. But you deserve complete understanding of what accepting such imperfect offering entails. Tell me. There will be days when shadows return, he acknowledged candidly. When trusting proves difficult despite rational understanding. When ghosts of past betrayal whisper doubts, I must actively silence rather than instinctively believe. Mirelle nodded, appreciating his honesty rather than false assurances. And yet, he continued, something profound shifting behind winter sea eyes, I believe with increasing certainty that navigating those shadows together represents genuine living rather than mere existence. As do I, she whispered. The Duke, no, Thalen, for titles seemed suddenly inadequate for such intimate truth, raised her fingers to his lips in a gesture that transcended mere courtesy. Your tears that night in the library, he murmured against her skin. They haunted me precisely because they penetrated defenses constructed against precisely such vulnerability. I never intended manipulation through emotion, she assured him. I know. His smile, genuine rather than practiced, transformed austere features into unexpected warmth. Your authenticity revealed my artifice. Your courage highlighted my cowardice. Your persistent light illuminated shadows I'd mistaken for necessary structure. Before Mirelle could respond, a tentative knock interrupted their exchange. Jenkins appeared at the threshold, his expression apologetic yet insistent. Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace, but chapel preparations await your approval, and several tenants have arrived early with Christmas offerings requiring acknowledgement. Thalen nodded, aristocratic composure returning without completely erasing the man beneath. We shall attend them directly. After the footman departed, he turned back to Mirelle with uncharacteristic hesitation. We must continue this conversation when seasonal obligations permit. Indeed, she agreed, reluctantly withdrawing her hands from his. Though perhaps actions have already spoken what words merely confirm. His expression softened with understanding. Nevertheless, certain declarations deserve proper expression beyond interrupted moments. Then I shall anticipate their completion, Mirelle replied, a smile illuminating her features, though perhaps without 17 years' patience. Remarkably, Thalen laughed, a genuine sound so unexpected that Mirelle momentarily stared in astonishment. A reasonable limitation, he acknowledged, offering his arm with formal courtesy that somehow conveyed deeper meaning. "Shall we attend our guests?" Christmas Day unfolded in golden moments that accumulated like treasures. Chapel services where the Duke stood proudly beside Mirelle rather than maintaining customary distance. The children's feast where he distributed gifts with unexpected warmth. Afternoon reception where local gentry witnessed their master's transformation with poorly concealed astonishment. Lady Pembroke, the region's most formidable dowager, observed proceedings with shrewd assessment before cornering Mirelle beside the refreshment table. "You've accomplished what many considered impossible," she pronounced without preamble, "resurrecting Lawnwick's spirit after 17 years' entombment." "The Abbey was never truly dormant," Mirelle replied diplomatically, "merely reserved." "Reserved?" Lady Pembroke snorted delicately. "My dear, that's like calling the Arctic somewhat chilly. Your husband withdrew completely after that dreadful scandal. We understood his retreat initially, but when years passed without recovery," she shook her silver head, "we feared Lawnwick's heart had stopped permanently." Mirelle glanced across the room where Thalen conversed with tenant farmers, his manner attentive rather than merely dutiful. "The heart merely required proper encouragement to beat again." "Encouragement you've clearly provided," Lady Pembroke observed shrewdly, "though I cannot imagine how you penetrated defences that repelled society's most determined efforts." Before Mirelle could respond, Catherine joined their conversation with impeccable timing. "Perhaps my sister possesses qualities society overlooked while focusing on superficial remedies." "Meaning?" Lady Pembroke prompted. "Authenticity rather than calculation," Catherine suggested. "Patience instead of expectation. Acceptance where others offered judgment." The Dowager considered this assessment thoughtfully. "Qualities increasingly rare in our circles." Her gaze returned to Mirelle with newfound respect. "Well done, Duchess. Lawnwick deserves restoration after such prolonged winter." Later, as twilight descended upon snow-covered grounds, guests departed with seasonal wishes and genuine invitations for future engagements, social connections long dormant, reactivated through Christmas warmth. The orphans returned to their dormitory wing, exhausted from unprecedented celebration, yet glowing with contentment. Catherine retired early, claiming travel fatigue, while tactfully providing privacy for conversations left unfinished. Servants completed final duties before withdrawing, leaving Lawnwick's master and mistress alone before the library hearth, where their journey had truly begun months before. "You've transformed Lawnwick," Thalen observed, watching firelight illuminate Mirelle's features. Lady Pembroke spoke for many today when she noted the Abbey's revival. "I merely removed barriers," she countered gently. "Lawnwick's heart never truly stopped. It simply required freedom to beat naturally again." A metaphor extending beyond architecture to its master, I suspect. His smile, easier now, more frequent, softened features once stern with perpetual guardedness, though accurate in both applications. Mirelle studied him thoughtfully, noting subtle transformations these past months had wrought. Tension eased from aristocratic brow, shoulders relaxed beneath formal attire, eyes warmed from winter seas to spring skies. "Lady Pembroke called you utterly transformed." Overstated but not entirely inaccurate. He moved from his chair to join her on the settee, proximity that would have been unthinkable months before. "Though I prefer restoration to transformation." Semantic distinction. "Meaningful difference," he corrected gently. "Transformation suggests becoming something entirely new. Restoration acknowledges returning to authentic nature temporarily obscured." Mirelle considered his words, finding wisdom in the distinction. "Then perhaps we've both experienced restoration rather than transformation." "How so?" "You've rediscovered capacity for connection long suppressed beneath protective barriers," she explained, "while I've recovered confidence in my own perceptions despite formidable opposition." Spring sunshine bathed Lawnwick Abbey in golden radiance, transforming stern medieval architecture into something unexpectedly welcoming. 4 months had passed since Christmas revelations. 16 weeks of gradual unfurling like crocuses emerging through melting snow, tentative, yet inevitable. Mirelle stood in the newly restored music room, where morning light streamed through windows uncovered after decades of deliberate shadow. Her fingers moved across the pianoforte's gleaming keys, Beethoven's Spring Sonata filling the chamber with joyful complexity. The music room had become her particular sanctuary, though she no longer practiced alone. Thalen often joined her, sometimes merely listening, occasionally attempting simple duets with endearing determination. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted her practice. Turning toward the doorway, she discovered her husband watching with undisguised appreciation, his expression transformed from the austere mask that had greeted her 8 months prior. "Beautiful," he commented, entering fully, "though I hesitate to interrupt your concentration." "A welcome interruption," she assured him, moving aside on the bench in silent invitation. He joined her, their shoulders touching comfortably, physical proximity that had evolved from cautious formality to natural ease these past months. Lawnwick itself mirrored this evolution, its once somber halls gradually reclaiming vibrancy through opened curtains, fresh flowers, and most significantly regular inhabitants beyond its immediate household. "The last orphanage trustees departed?" Mirelle inquired, knowing he had spent the morning in administrative meetings. "With considerable satisfaction regarding new arrangements," he confirmed. "Your suggestion to consolidate oversight while expanding local involvement proved remarkably effective." Mirelle smiled, pleased by his unqualified endorsement. January had seen Lawnwick's charitable foundations restructured under their joint stewardship, with Grain's complicated mechanisms simplified into transparent governance. The solicitor himself had departed for London, his severed connection with the Veras family occasioning considerable speculation throughout county society. Lady Riadne's letter arrived, Thalen mentioned, withdrawing correspondence from his coat. Her first communication since Christmas boundaries were established. Mirelle studied his expression, noting cautious optimism rather than apprehension. Conciliatory? Surprisingly so. He unfolded parchment bearing his aunt's distinctive script. She acknowledges overstepping appropriate limitations and requests permission to visit during summer months, with explicit acceptance of altered circumstances. A significant concession from someone who considered me calculating temptress. His lips curved into the smile that had gradually become familiar rather than exceptional. Her precise phrasing suggests genuine reflection. "I recognize that protection without trust becomes imprisonment, and that my nephew has found liberation rather than endangerment through connection I wrongly feared." "Remarkably insightful," Mirelle observed, genuinely surprised by such evolution from the formidable dowager. "Riadne's intelligence never lacked acuity," Thalen acknowledged fairly, "merely perspective beyond her specific experiences." He refolded the letter thoughtfully. "She requests your correspondence as well, a rather unprecedented olive branch." "Which I shall accept," Mirelle decided immediately. "Reconciliation serves everyone better than prolonged estrangement." Thalen's expression softened with appreciation. "Your capacity for genuine forgiveness remains remarkable." "Not forgiveness exactly," she clarified, "rather recognition that people may evolve beyond past limitations given proper opportunity." "As we have both demonstrated," he acknowledged, fingers absently tracing the amber ribbon he still carried, now a talisman of transformation rather than painful reminder. They sat in comfortable silence, spring breeze carrying garden fragrance through open windows. Lawnwick's restoration extended beyond emotional reconnection into physical renewal. Gardens reclaimed from severity into balanced beauty. Architecture softened through thoughtful adaptation. Chambers long sealed reopened to sunlight and purpose. "Catherine arrives tomorrow," Mirelle mentioned, resuming gentle improvisation upon the keyboard. "With considerable excitement regarding our summer plans. Your sister has embraced rural possibilities with unexpected enthusiasm," Thalen observed with amusement, "though I suspect certain eligible gentlemen among county families may influence her newfound appreciation for country living." Mirelle laughed, a sound that had gradually filled Lawnwick's chambers with increasing frequency. "She denies any particular attachment, though Sir William Harrington's name appears with suspicious regularity in her correspondence." "A respectable match, should affections develop genuinely," Thalen commented, surprising her with his tacit approval of potential connection between aristocracy and gentry. Another boundary dissolved through experience rather than principle alone. Movement in the doorway drew their attention to Jenkins, who carried a small silver tray bearing single correspondence. "Forgive the interruption, Your Grace. An urgent letter has arrived from London, requiring immediate acknowledgement." Thalen accepted the missive with practiced courtesy. As Jenkins withdrew, he examined the unfamiliar seal before breaking wax with sudden tension evident in his posture. "Troubling news?" Mirelle inquired, noting his expression shifting as he read. "Unexpected rather than troubling," he replied, handing her the letter once he'd finished, "though requiring significant consideration." Mirelle scanned elegant script with increasing astonishment. Parliamentary appointment? Foreign diplomatic service? Apparently my occasional contributions regarding international charitable ventures attracted ministerial attention, he explained, seeming genuinely surprised by the recognition. They propose official position coordinating diplomatic and philanthropic initiatives across continental Europe. An extraordinary opportunity, Mirelle observed, immediately grasping implications, though requiring London residence and considerable travel. Precisely why I hesitate, Thalen acknowledged, studying her reaction carefully. Such appointment would have represented perfect solution 18 months ago, purposeful work requiring disciplined detachment from emotional complications. And now? His expression softened as he regarded her, truly saw her, with the unguarded tenderness that had gradually replaced aristocratic reserve. Now, such isolation represents imprisonment rather than freedom. Lawnwick has reclaimed its purpose as sanctuary rather than mausoleum. Mirelle set aside the letter, turning toward him fully. Don't dismiss opportunity without proper consideration. What serves Lawnwick best isn't necessarily what serves the broader world or your particular talents. You suggest accepting the appointment? He asked, genuinely seeking her counsel rather than merely informing her of decisions predetermined. I suggest considering all possibilities, she clarified, including adaptation, rather than outright acceptance or rejection, meaning diplomatic service need not require permanent London residence, she explained thoughtfully. Quarterly sojourns for parliamentary matters, with remaining administration conducted from Lawnwick. Technology increasingly allows communication without constant physical presence. Thalen considered her suggestion with growing interest, restructuring the appointment to balance public service with private restoration. Precisely. Mirelle's fingers found his, a gesture that had evolved from tentative breakthrough to natural communion. Why abandon Lawnwick's renewal when we might instead extend its principles beyond these walls? Something profound shifted behind his eyes, appreciation deeper than mere agreement. Your perspective consistently transforms limitations into possibilities, as does yours, she countered gently, when not obscured by unnecessary barriers. He raised their joined hands, placing a kiss upon her fingers that transcended mere courtesy. We shall craft response together then, accepting opportunity while establishing boundaries that protect what matters most. Together, she agreed, the simple word conveying evolution beyond their individual transformations into something stronger, more resilient than either alone. Beyond the music room windows, Lawnwick's gardens bloomed with unprecedented vibrancy, formal structures softened by wildflowers, rigid topiary balanced with natural growth, ancient and new, coexisting in harmonious balance. The estate itself embodied the transformation within its master and mistress, not abandonment of strength, but its enhancement through authentic connection. Later that evening, as sunset painted Lawnwick's western towers in amber and gold, they walked arm in arm through gardens where spring's renewal mirrored their own journey. The amber ribbon, her first offering that had once represented forbidden sentiment, now adorned the journal he carried daily, filled with reflections both practical and profound. I've been contemplating our conversation from Christmas, Thalen mentioned as they paused beside a marble bench overlooking the valley. When I acknowledged loving you but warned of imperfect implementation. I remember, Mirelle replied, studying his expression in golden evening light. I failed to request something essential then, he continued, unexpected vulnerability emerging beneath ducal composure. Your response remained unspoken amid seasonal obligations and unexpected confrontations. Understanding dawned as Mirelle recognized the moment's significance, this proud, once isolated man, seeking confirmation he had previously feared beyond endurance. You wish to know if your feelings are reciprocated, if asking proves unnecessary presumption. She silenced his uncertainty by placing gentle fingers against his lips. I have loved you since witnessing the man behind carefully constructed walls, not despite your struggles, but including them as essential components of who you truly are. Relief and wonder transformed his features as she continued with quiet certainty. Your capacity for growth, for choosing vulnerability despite legitimate fears, revealed courage greater than any armor of detachment could demonstrate. Mirelle, he whispered, her name emerging as both question and answer. The Duke may have claimed my hand through practical arrangement, she concluded softly, but Duke of Veras claimed my heart through authentic connection neither of us anticipated. As spring twilight descended upon Lawnwick Abbey, Its master and mistress remained in the gardens where rigid structure had gradually yielded to natural beauty. The transformation extended beyond physical surroundings to the souls within, not abandonment of strength, but its enhancement through courage to risk authentic connection despite past wounds. Lawnwick had awakened from 17 years' slumber into new purpose, not merely preservation of tradition, but its evolution through balanced integration of duty and connection, principle and emotion, past wisdom and future possibility. Two souls, once separated by fear disguised as virtue, had discovered that true love transcended simple sentiment to embrace complete acceptance of another's authentic nature, shadows, light, and all that existed between. The abbey's ancient stones, witness to centuries of human struggle, stood transformed in evening light, not through architectural alteration, but through the hearts that now beat freely within its walls. As darkness finally descended, stars emerged above Lawnwick's towers, eternal witnesses to the enduring truth that love's greatest power lies not in perfect circumstances, but in the willingness to risk vulnerability despite legitimate fears, to choose connection despite past wounds, and to recognize that tears sometimes speak truths no words can adequately express. The deepest moral of our tale extends beyond romantic sentiment to touch universal human truth. That which we fear most often contains the seeds of our greatest healing. When the Duke labeled Mirelle's love a sin, he was not condemning her, but protecting himself from the vulnerability that love demands. True strength does not lie in isolation, but in the courage to remain open despite legitimate fears. The Duke built walls of principle, duty, and detachment, not because he lacked feeling, but because he felt too deeply. His journey reminds us that emotional armor, constructed to protect, often becomes a prison that separates us from authentic connection. Mirelle's persistent grace, her willingness to offer understanding without demanding immediate reciprocation, demonstrates that true love is patient, not in passive acceptance of mistreatment, but in recognition that healing follows its own timeline. Her tears were not weapons of manipulation, but authentic expressions of a heart too full to contain its truth. Perhaps most powerfully, this story teaches us that our past wounds need not define our future possibilities. The Duke's 17-year entombment in grief and betrayal nearly cost him the joy of genuine connection. How many of us similarly surrender future happiness to protect ourselves from pain we've previously experienced? The transformation of Lawnwick Abbey mirrors our own potential for renewal. Like the Duke, we may have constructed elaborate justifications for emotional isolation, convincing ourselves that detachment equals strength and vulnerability equals weakness. Yet true wisdom recognizes that a heart closed to pain also cannot fully experience joy. What fears disguised as principles might we be clinging to? What barriers constructed for legitimate protection have outlived their purpose to become limitations? What tears, our own or others, have we dismissed as weakness when they actually represented courage to feel authentically? The Duke said her love was a sin until her tears made him question what true love means for two souls. Perhaps the deepest lesson lies in this transformation of perspective, recognizing that what we initially fear, reject, or condemn often contains precisely the grace we most deeply need. Dear listener, as the final notes of our tale fade into contemplative silence, I invite you to join our community of storytelling enthusiasts, where Victorian romance breathes new life through your participation. If the Duke and Mirelle's journey from isolation to connection touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel. Each subscription supports the creation of more stories that explore love's transformative power across time and circumstance. Did you find yourself holding your breath as the Duke finally acknowledged his feelings? Did Mirelle's patient grace remind you of someone in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective enriches our collective understanding of these timeless themes. For those seeking more Victorian romance with depth and emotional resonance, click the notification bell to be first to hear our upcoming tales of honor-tested, hearts redeemed, and love that transcends society's rigid boundaries. Remember, when you comment "Lawnwick Lives Again," you'll be entered into our monthly drawing for exclusive content unavailable elsewhere. Until our paths cross in another tale of hearts transformed through love's patient courage, may your own story unfold with the perfect balance of strength and vulnerability, principle and passion, duty and connection that our beloved Duke and Duchess discovered within Lawnwick's awakening halls.